Hey everybody, this is TJR. I'm filming a little prologue to this video where I discuss the latest episode of the Orville entitled Majority Rules. This particular episode really hit close to home for me, so I do actually kind of veer off, or seem to veer off, discussing some of my own personal experiences as a YouTube creator. And I do tie it back into the video. I'm bringing this up here because I don't normally do this, but I felt like I had to this time. There have been instances in the past where people have misinterpreted what I've said on the internet and misinterpreted my intent, and I bring up those examples. And in some of these cases, people have misinterpreted that what I was saying was political, even though it wasn't. I want you to be assured that I'm making absolutely no political commentary in this video, but I am making commentary about how people react to one another on the internet. And anyways, though, just a little preamble about this. First, I'm trying to just make sure that the conversation on this video stays focused and that you understand my focus in this video, because I know that in this internet age, we all tend to rush to judgment about each other. And that's why I think this particular episode of the Orville was such an important episode and why it hit so close to me and why I feel a need to talk about it. Anyways, here's the video. Hi, this is TJR, and after posting my video and suddenly the Orville becomes Star Trek, I thought that I probably wouldn't talk about this TV show for maybe a couple episodes or so, but after watching episode 7, entitled Majority Rules, I feel like I had to. This episode struck very close to home for me as a YouTube content creator. This episode did what Star Trek was always very good at doing, which is taking the social issues of the day and then recontextualizing them within a sci-fi action-adventure premise. In this case, this episode is dealing with our current internet culture, and more specifically, with what I refer to as the internet's rush to judgment culture. And I'll get more into that in just a moment here. The Orville has been following what I refer to as the episodic Star Trek formula really well. But in this episode, they break the formula. Instead of having the opening teaser take place aboard the ship or with one of our familiar crew members, instead, the opening teaser lets us have a little bit of a look at this planet's culture before going to the opening titles. Now, in this planet's culture, which is very similar to Earth's, everybody at the age of 18 gets a badge that they have to wear all the time. If you do something that someone doesn't like, they can click down on you, or they can click up on you if you do something they do like. And not unlike how we like things or disapprove of things on Facebook and YouTube and on all these internet platforms. The only difference is if you get enough dislikes, you could be refused service in public restaurants and in other places of business and be unable to, conduct everyday business. And if you do something in public that gets publicly recorded by anyone's mobile device and it goes viral, you could get enough dislikes from the general public at large and from the world at large to where you actually are under arrest. And if you don't reverse the situation on your what's referred to as your apology tour, you could end up facing charges, and you could end up going into what they refer to as corrections, where basically they lobotomize you. Now, if I wanted to take the time to think about this more deeply, I could definitely find some flaws in how this society is structured within the context of the story. For instance, what did this society do before they had the type of technology that we have now, where we do have this worldwide mass communication? How exactly did they do this prior? But I'm not going to go there right now because I still say this episode did a great job of dealing with its premise. Now, what happens is, of course, an away team from the Orville has to go to the planet surface to investigate the disappearance of 2 Union scientists who were sent there a ways back to basically just observe the planet's culture. While the away team is on the planet's surface, Lieutenant John Lamar, who has already been portrayed in the series as being very irreverent and not concerned with what others might think of his public behavior, does something publicly just trying to be funny, that basically gets him arrested within the context of this planet's culture. What he doesn't realize is that he's done the equivalent of basically going to the Lincoln Monument here in the United States and taking a leak on it. Now, of course, if you did that here in the United States, you would get arrested. You'd probably face some serious fines, and you'd be vilified all over the internet, but you wouldn't be executed for it, and you certainly wouldn't have your brain scrambled, which within the context of this particular world's culture is basically the equivalent of being executed. Now, as I said earlier, as a YouTube creator, this episode I thought really did a great job of examining our internet rush to judgment culture, as I describe it. And I'm going to digress here for a moment and just talk about some of my own personal experiences. When I created my Led Zeppelin versus Spirit, Stairway to Heaven versus Taurus examination video, now, as I said earlier, I felt that this episode really hit close to home for me as a YouTube content creator. And I feel like this episode made an excellent commentary on what I refer to as the internet's rush to judgment culture. I'm going to digress now and discuss some of my own personal experiences as a YouTube creator. Back when I created my Stairway to Heaven versus Taurus examination video, I kept getting comments from people who would not seek out the facts first. They would just rush to judgment. They would immediately say things like, those guys in the band Taurus, they're just a bunch of greedy SOBs, and they're just jealous because their song didn't make a lot of money, but Stairway to Heaven did, so they're just trying to go for the quick cash grab. I would continually have to correct these people and explain to them that nobody in the band was involved with this lawsuit. So you're pointing your anger at the wrong place, number one. Secondly, Randy California, who wrote the song Taurus, had passed away years ago. He died saving his son from a drowning accident. This lawsuit was being initiated by the estate of Randy California. And so I would explain this, and then they'd immediately rush to judgment again and say, well, then it's the estate. They're a bunch of greedy SOBs and, blah, 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 blah. Same thing. Now, of course, they could possibly be right about the estate of Randy California. This could be all motivated by greed. But we don't know these people. I don't know them, and I'm pretty sure the people commenting don't know these people. No one ever stopped to think, is it possible that maybe Randy California's estate, his family, which includes his son, who he saved and died saving, might think, my father was horribly wronged. My father's legacy deserves some justice. And this is the only way I can give that legacy some justice, is by initiating this lawsuit. Now, this theory could be wrong too, but it is a possible motivation. But once again, people tend to always rush to judgment, and they tend to rush to judgment in the negative rather than the positive. Because in our world, it is much easier to be cynical than it is to be positive. I'm going to share now another experience I had. I did a video where I analyzed the Beatles song, And I Love Her. Most of the time, in fact 99% of the time, the comments were, hey, great job, I really enjoyed this, thank you, that was insightful. I really appreciated all the comments. And then I got one commenter who said, you were doing great until you got political at the end. And I think he might have said something else afterwards, I don't know, something to like insult me or something. And I just looked at the comment, I was just puzzled by it, and I thought, what was political about my video? I didn't even bother to go back and look at my video. I just dismissed that comment and just don't answer it. You have no idea what kind of mentality you're dealing with, who knows? And it could be just someone a troll trying to start trouble. Then I got a second comment, basically saying the same thing, in fact, I think he said, you just lost a subscriber. This was great until you got political at the end. So I actually responded to this one, and I said to him, you're the second person who said that to me. Granted, this was the second person out of, hundreds and thousands, of viewers that has said this. And I said, could you please tell me what was political about my video? And he said there was a comment I made about looking at the past through rose-colored glasses. And so I went back and rewatched my video. And I talked about the fact that when people talk about the innocence of the lyrics of this song, that they might make the comment that it's because it comes from a more innocent time period. And I said in my commentary, there's nothing more innocent about that time period than now. And that when people say these kinds of things, they tend to look at the past through rose-colored glasses. I oftentimes will see posts on Facebook where they'll say things like, and here's a good example, 30 years ago, we didn't have to be careful about letting our children go out and play unsupervised because we didn't have to worry about child molesters back then. Child molesters existed 30 years ago, 40 years, 50 years ago. They existed. We just weren't, as a society, aware of their existence. So we didn't see the need to have as much supervision and with our children, and didn't mind them, walking home alone late at night from seeing a friend, from going to a friend's house. We didn't think there was a need because we didn't know that the threat was there. But it was there. We just didn't know about it. We are better off as a society now being aware that it's there so that we can do something about it. I can take any period in history, and if you say to me, well, things were better back then, I can research that period and find hundreds of reasons why things weren't better back then. By that same token, I could also use the same techniques to show why things aren't as good now too, if I wanted to. What it comes down to is that every period in history has things that were good about it and things that were bad about it. It all depends on what you decide to do with the situation and the period of time that you are living in now and what you choose to do. Getting back to my video though, as I rewatched it, at the ending I punctuated my point by bringing up the fact that when a politician says, "Let's make America great again," they are hoping that you will look back on the past through rose-colored glasses rather than through the glasses of objective reasoning. And this is where I realized, this is what these two people are talking about. Donald Trump, of course, was using the "Let's make America great again" slogan during his campaign. But what these two individuals didn't realize is that Donald Trump is not the first politician to do this. Politicians throughout history have been using the "Let's make America great again" slogan. It's nothing new with Trump, trust me. And I should also add that politicians on both the left and the right have used this slogan in the past. But this individual and the one before him clearly saw this as, you're attacking Trump, therefore you're attacking me because I'm a Trump supporter. Now, I explained to the individual that, I wasn't making a political statement so much as I was just making a statement about society and how we tend to look at the past. We look at it through rose-colored glasses as opposed to looking at it objectively. Now, to his credit, he calmed down with me a bit and said to me, hey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I made some troll-like comments. I really thought your analysis of the song was great. But I really do feel like things are getting worse in this country, worse and worse. And I wrote back to him, I think I might have said, people have been feeling that way for generations now. Every generation has that feeling that things are getting worse because we look at the past through rose-colored glasses and we don't look at it objectively. I, said to him, hey, man, no worries, it's all good, But I have to admit, there was an impulse on my part at first to rush to judgment about this guy and just simply write him off and say, yeah, these Trump supporters, they're like crazy. They're wackos. They just like fly off the handle over anything. They can't look at anything without, immediately putting on their agenda visor and seeing everything through that. But because this is the internet, I have the opportunity to stop, take a breath, and think. Don't write off this guy. I have no idea where he's coming from or what his backstory is. Maybe he's been dealing with a lot of hate himself. Maybe he's had people attack him on Facebook or on Twitter because of his beliefs and his ideas. Maybe he's had friends and family who have, given him a lot of heat because he's a Trump supporter. So maybe he's just more sensitive. Having said all this now, I also realize that just the very fact that I've mentioned the current administration is going to make some people think that I'm making a political statement right now, and I'm probably going to get some reactionary comments. But I want to stress here, I am not making a political statement. I am talking about how our internet culture, the current state of it, where we just simply immediately write people off because we rush to judgment. And we immediately stereotype people because we rush to judgment. Okay, so let's get back to the episode now. Now, the crew of the Orville gets some help from one of the planet's inhabitants, and they feed a tremendous amount of false information about John Lamar into this planet's version of the World Wide Web to help influence the voting that is going to decide his fate. And at one point, one of the Orville crew members says to the inhabitant of the planet, who's a young woman, will anyone bother to corroborate any of this information? And she said no. It was a funny moment, and it was a commentary once again on our internet culture. I don't know how many times I've seen stuff pasted on Facebook posing as real information, and it wasn't. One of my favorite ones was the one that stated that under Obamacare, everybody was going to have an information chip planted in the back of their neck. And I remember this getting passed around Facebook, and people went insane over it and saying things like, over my dead body, that's going to happen. Of course, none of this was true. But nobody even bothered to do a simple 5-minute internet fact search to see before they started spreading it around and commenting on it. And this is because when we see something that agrees with our worldview, we just accept it as truth, even when it's an utter total lie. And to a certain extent, we are all guilty of believing what we want to hear. But with all this said, I also want to point out that we as a society are still in our infancy in regards to this information highway internet culture that we have created. We're still learning how to use it. We're still learning how to deal with it and respond to it. We are very much in the early stages of this culture, and we're going to make mistakes as we learn and progress and grow. And I think it's great, though, that, a TV show like this can basically kind of point the mirror back at us and say, this is what we need to watch out for, and this is a kind of a warning of where we could end up if we don't watch ourselves and police ourselves. And science fiction has always been good at doing that. And this form of storytelling, you can trace it all the way back to the Bible when, Jesus would tell the parables to the apostles. And, we've had this, always had this. And Star Trek, the original series, did this. The episodes where morality plays. The Twilight Zone series did this. So did all the other Star Trek shows, Next Generation. Star Trek Discovery, who knows? I'm not really sure, but we'll see what happens. But at any rate, the Orville is doing this too, and I think it did a great job of it with this episode. I also have to admit that even though there wasn't a whole lot of action in this episode, there was a good amount of suspense as we waited to see what was going to happen. Very well done. So have you seen this episode? What did you think? I'm curious to check out your comments. And like I said before, I didn't expect to talk about this show again after the last video that I did, but had to comment on this episode, and we'll see what happens next. Maybe I will comment on the next, maybe I won't, we'll see. But at any rate, though, thank you everybody for watching. I'm looking forward to checking out your comments, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.